So this morning will be a little different from the rest of the conference. As I explained before, there will be presentations and study circles and so forth. But this morning we're going to hear from ITC's 3 presidents. We have 3 presidents. And we just heard from our president. And but we haven't heard from all 3 in terms of the presentation that they want to give us, which is has to do with what they think can be the meaning and the potency of the ITC. So, so we will be hearing from their 3 messages. And Nicolaas Kind he lives in Brasilia, and he's from the TSA ADYAR, and he could not make it physically to this conference. But I just talked to him this morning, and he is very much here, I guarantee you. And his presence is here, and he is part of the leadership of this conference. And he will be actually giving a message that we will see on the screen right away. And after Jan's message, we will hear from Herman Vermeulen, and he's from the Theosophical Society Point Loma. And then we will hear from Gene Jennings again from the ULT. So, you want to roll it?
Hello Philadelphia, this is Brasilia calling. Gene Jennings, Herman Vermeulen and myself will put before you the question, how can ITC aim at being a practical example of brotherhood, a nucleus and a healing force? Well, you'll agree with me that is a rather ambitious and challenging sort of takeoff for this conference. Fasten your seatbelts. From my point of view, ITC is a unique body. It is not another Theosophical Society or current. It is a platform where all who consider themselves Theosophists belonging to one of the various vehicles, but also non-affiliated students, come together. A friend of mine in Holland once compared ITC and its platform function with the United Nations. But I would rather draw a comparison with the Commonwealth of Nations, undoubtedly one of the most democratic organizations in existence. The Commonwealth of Nations is a voluntary association of around 52 sovereign states. Nearly all of them are former British colonies or dependencies of those colonies. No one government in the Commonwealth exercises power over the others, as is the case in a political union. It is an international organization in which countries with diverse social, political and economic backgrounds are regarded as equal in status and cooperate within a framework of common values and goals. Each member country has complete freedom to express its own opinion about world affairs. And when the heads of state meet, for example, they never take a vote. They discuss matters and come to an informal agreement. However, as is the case inside the Theosophical movement, the Commonwealth contains so many sorts of different people from so many parts of the world that inevitably there are disagreements. But it doesn't seem unreasonable to say, as Prince Philip once said, that the Commonwealth is the nearest things we have to the brotherhood of man. Many wise women and men have written about brotherhood, so what is there still to add? As is the case of the Commonwealth, here on ITC's platform we meet, and our backgrounds are very different and diverse. Theosophically speaking, even very diverse. And although we consider ourselves Theosophists, over the past, let's say, 122 years, we have gone out of our way to act in a manner among ourselves you wouldn't expect from folks who are supposed to be tolerant freethinkers, claiming that we should strive for brotherhood. So, we can all agree that brotherhood already exists, being a fact in nature. In that sense, it has always existed and always it will remain. But if we are talking about the realization of brotherhood by human beings, it is a different question. In this context, Joy Mills often mentioned that we went astray. We left our home, and that it is about time that we'll return to it. But in order to do so, we need to have a serious look at ourselves. ITC gatherings and activities can help in that process. And if, as our team title indicates, those who are assembled in the Theosophical movement want to be a healing force in the world, don't we need to heal ourselves as well? Shouldn't we make efforts to become whole again? To return home, to become whole again, we have to be aware of the self, which is the first step toward greater awareness of the divine dimension in oneself and in life. It's all about knowing who we really are and not what others might tell us we should be. To reach knowledge of our transcendental spiritual self, we must begin to perceive the obstructions in the personality. We recognize our habits and emotional reactions, our prejudices, fears, in other words, the psychological patterns that largely govern the way we handle situations and our feelings. These patterns are not necessarily harmful or bad, but we must find the ones that are obstructions to our spirituality. Because if we do not, they can blind us to other freer possibilities for living more spontaneously in the moment and can distort the way we see ourselves, our lives, and other Theosophists, for example. As we become less dominated by habitual patterns, we can learn to live increasingly from a higher perspective, and our problems, differences become less urgent, and we see our lives and our fellow seekers in an overall balanced and mature manner, and our work for ITC offers us that exclusive possibility. Meeting on the ITC platform, weeding out negative qualities and prejudices, misunderstandings, but also having the courage to detach from our beliefs if needed, replacing them with other and positive ideas, and the willingness to be open at all times, is most certainly a long-range project, and so patience and tolerance are required. Working with Theosophists from other streams as we do, we learn that a system of knowledge or a system of thought, per definition, is not absolute. We need to observe and investigate that what is handed out to us, explore and verify it, but in the end, we must decide for ourselves what applies to us, never on the authority of someone else. After having participated in several ITC gatherings, I came to realize that for some of us it is hard, if not impossible, to open up for other theosophical approaches, authors, or ways of thinking. Now, to be clear, and in my opinion, to be open doesn't necessarily mean that we would need to have an agreement on all topics. Oh yes, there are elephants in the room and that needs to be addressed. But on the other hand, our diversity could be our strength instead of our weakness. We all aim for the same. The roads toward that goal, however, might differ. But that shouldn't be an obstacle for us to come together, to share, to experience, and above all, to learn. Now, friends, it might be easy to actually talk about the elephants in the room and that we need to deal with them, but it ain't that simple to break that dialogue open. So let me just dispatch 4 elephants to you, and all based on apparent misconceptions and from an IDR perspective. Elephant number 1. William Judge, or Mr. Judge, as he is often referred to by ULT students, is fully recognized as one of the 3 principal founders of the TS. As such, he is mentioned on the official website of the TS IDR. All his works are available in IDR bookstores and libraries. Elephant number 2. Students in the TS IDR do study the original works by HBB. It needs to be underscored here that the freedom of thought resolution allows IDR members to follow any line of theosophical literature. There are no restrictions. Elephant number 3. Although Annie Besant, C.W. Leadbeater and Geoffrey Hodson are distinguished authors, CWL and Hodson typically on the clairvoyant line, in the IDR environment it is not so that they are all determining or exercise any authority over IDR members. There are many other authors following different lines, and there are also leaders as such in high regard. I mention M. Sri Ram, Joy Mills, Dr. John Algeo, Geoffrey Farthing, Shirley Nicholson and Ian T. Hoskins, just to mention a few. The last elephant, number 4. Krishnamurti, who left the TS in 1929, is by many IDR members considered to be an exceptional author, an authentic philosopher, and inspiring teacher, as there were many like him. Just think of Swami Vivekananda, Sri Aurobindo, the Mother, and Sri Ramana Maharishi, etc. By working together, we will come to see that our diversity will work for us instead of against us. Each one of us, no matter what vehicle we belong to, must undertake that search for truth. Truth cannot be wrapped up in a book or a teaching, which solely functions as a pointer or even an organization. The French novelist Marcel Proust, in his book In Search of Lost Time, wrote, and I quote, "We are not provided with wisdom. We must discover it for ourselves after a journey through the wilderness, which no one else can take for us, an effort which no one can spare us." End of quote. So again, and within ITC context, upholding its purposes after 100 and something years of quarrels and splits, disagreements and accusations, inspired by the full comprehension of what brotherhood means, we ought to come home again and sit at one table, listening to each other without any preconditions. For now, and the next couple of days, the Friends Center in Philadelphia is our home. Here is that podium where we meet. Our backgrounds are to be respected. In the discussions we will engage in during the study circles, following the dialogue principle, no one is right and no one is wrong. And anyone can say what she or he sincerely feels should be said. ITC's purpose number 2 is so very clear. We want to foster mutual, meaningful intercommunication, understanding and respect among theosophical mainstreams, stimulating thereby continuous spiritual unity. To be active in any theosophical cell or group calls for responsibility. The commitment to serve cannot be taken lightly. If indeed we want to help this terribly fragmented world, if we really want to be a healing force, it is apparent that studying Theosophy alone is far from sufficient. Theosophical studies are often regarded as being purely intellectual exercises. But these studies, however, should provide corridors toward tools and practicalities to lend helping hands in the world around us. Making others aware of the fact that there is an esoteric philosophy as old as the planet is one thing. But how do we heal that world? This can only be accomplished by setting practical examples, by making Theosophy a living force in our lives. In her book, Human Regeneration, the former international president of the TSRDR, Radha Bernier, stated, and I quote, "Theosophists do not seek wisdom for themselves, but for the world they live in. And the more deeply devoted they are, the more they can contribute to the regeneration of mankind. And the more ardently they seek to understand themselves and the world, they will find that they are able to penetrate further into the secret of life." End of quote. Friends, so far I have spoken briefly about brotherhood and healing. Let's focus for a moment on the nucleus. William Judge, at one point in time, referring to a discussion he had with HBB in London, remembered what she in her own outspoken way had told him regarding the nucleus, and I quote, "You were not directed to found and realize a universal brotherhood, but to form a nucleus for one. For it is only when the nucleus is formed that the accumulations can begin that will end in future years, however far, in the formation of that body which we have in view." End of quote. Joy Mills, and I referred to her earlier in this presentation, a distinguished author and well-known theosophist, wrote in her book One True Adventure, and I quote, "Members of the society have difficulty forming a nucleus, which surely means a living center of genuine brotherhood. So, to what extent have we engaged in forming a nucleus of brotherhood?" End of quote. Friends, we are talking here about a cell, a living expression within an already existing and larger body. Clearly, a nucleus as such doesn't mean that there is any connection with an elite. In the past, there has been some confusion about that. International Theosophy conferences, and that is all of you present in Philadelphia, but also those members who couldn't come, principally speaking, form that integrated nucleus. You are to be an inspired, motivated, active, unselfish group of women and men who are taking on the challenge to come together with this goal to preserve, vitalize and keep the teachings accessible for those who knock, always driven by an attitude to altruistic service for the holy ones. If we, as partners in Theosophy, as seekers for truth, not as proclaimers of truth, are able to work and study together with a clear objective to go into the world, not only through this ITC platform, during ITC gatherings, but especially in the months which lie in between the meetings, making cross-pollination factual, we set out on a journey of which most of us will not see the end. Didn't we learn that we must try to think in century? Now, why are we doing all this? What is ITC's specific function here? Does it something the mainstreams don't do? Let me try to elaborate on this. In 1875, there was a good reason for the masters to initiate another impulse, to make known through their channel HBB that such a thing as Theosophy exists, although not all of them were equally enthusiastic. We can earnestly ask ourselves the question whether Theosophy is still relevant in our day and age. But let's first look at that year, 1875. It is a few decades after the finish of the Industrial Revolution. The first trains ride. Alexander Graham Bell patents the telephone in 1876. Thomas Edison invents the tinfoil phonograph in 1877. Charles Parsons patents the first steam turbine in 1884, and in 1887 Emil Berliner invents the gramophone. Also, most of the political systems we see now in 2017 found their origin in that same era. Socialism, communism, liberalism, conservatism, all those countless isms. So much was going on in the world when on November 17, 1875 in New York the TS was founded. So, we are 140 years on the road with our movement. That's a drop on eternity's hot plate. Is there an analogy with what happened around 1875? The answer is clearly yes. So much is going on. Technical developments are hard to follow. We're all interconnected through tablets, smartphones, computers. Medical science is able to cure many types of cancer that 25 years ago were incurable. We can transplant hearts, livers, lungs. Through nanotechnology, it might become possible even that in the nearby future, radio and chemotherapy won't be administered any longer. Not to speak of, although somewhat controversial, what openings might come to the service through stem cell research. We send satellites into space that will travel far beyond our solar system. And within a few decades, we will send people on a mission to land on Mars. But has the world really changed for the better since 1875, in spite of all that so-called progress? Have we really been able to deepen ourselves? Has mankind demonstrated that it can let go of all the personal? Did we do away with the I? Was it possible for us earthlings to grasp the notion that, as much as this was the case in 1875, religious misuse, religious misunderstanding, and religious misinterpretation has brought our civilization to the brink of a total collapse? Friends, again, if in 1875 there was a good reason for the masters to initiate another impulse, I dare to say that in 2017 that reason is still there, but now 100-fold. Because since 1875, we have been introduced to new phenomena, such as corporate greed, inadequate educational systems, far-going corruption, environmental disasters, inequality among the peoples of this planet, not to think of the terror of the stock markets. ITC, through its gatherings, publications, stimulating cross-pollination, simply does aim first and foremost at being a practical example of a brotherhood, a nucleus and a healing force. And while I realize that we are in the midst of Kali Yuga still, and it might take 10,000 of years before eventually we'll embark on the ascending arc, we as Theosophists, working from our own perspectives and through ITC, can help, guide, nurturing mankind while pointing to a better comprehension of these disturbing processes I have just described. The nucleus is who we are, the cell being a part of a larger body, and within that concept we are alike. We have taken it upon us to overcome apparent hindrances from the past, without, and I must stress this, losing our own identities. Let's scare all those elephants out of the room. All streams are effect, and it shall remain that way. Through what International Theosophy Conference has developed into, thanks to all the input of so many, we now are able to work hard towards a theosophical future. To conclude my presentation, active co-workers of ITC form the nucleus. It is a living entity, and as such they can reach out to others, to commemorate together, to study together, to share literature and articles, or to support an initiative together. And here I'm thinking of the countless possibilities of support that could be given to one of the many projects the Theosophical Order of Service is involved in. Hopefully, ITC's platform encounters will cause us to be inspired and enlightened, so that at the moment, after an ITC gathering, when we are back in our own environment, in our own lodges, as students of the ULT, as members of the TS Point Loma Blavatsky House, or as TS-ADR members, or as non-affiliated students, we, fully energized and motivated, take on the task that is waiting for us. So, in a nutshell, on Brotherhood, let's come home again. On a Nucleus, that is what and who we are. On that healing force, we can heal others if indeed we can apply that process on ourselves first. Thanks for listening. Thanks to Ben Dan Hartog in the Netherlands for making this recording possible. Have a grand gathering, and I send warm greetings from Brasilia.